Okay, so this is a lecture on the Treaty of Versailles and Wilson's 14 points, and I'm going to move fairly quickly just so I don't run over the 15-minute time cap. So this all starts with Woodrow Wilson making a speech in early 1918, a few months before the U.S. went to war, and he talked about what the aims of war should be, and his speech is known as the 14 points speech because he made 14 points in it, and we'll talk about a few of them. So his first point, he said his plan would help make the world safer and more peaceful. He said there should be no more secret agreements between countries and no more alliances that could drag countries into war. So, for example, like agreements had been made in the past that made it so if one went to war, the other would have to back them up. He also wanted freedom of the seas so that trade could go on without interference, even in wartime. He wanted everyone to reduce the size of their military and the amount of their weapons so they wouldn't be so eager to go to war. He said all land seized in war should be returned to its rightful owner, but he didn't really say how you would figure out who the rightful owner is. He wanted freedom and independence for colonial people and for the ethnic groups in Europe who were not free. So again, the European countries who had colonies would not like this, and the countries who had a lot of ethnic groups within their borders would not like this as well. And one of his biggest points was that he wanted to set up a League of Nations so that countries could discuss their disagreements and settle them peacefully. The 14 points were Wilson's idea. The Allies were not involved in creating them, and in 1918, Germany surrendered, and they were hoping that the peace agreement would be based on Wilson's 14 points. Because one of his big arguments is that it should be a peace without victors, or a peace without victories. So everyone would have a say in the treaty, not just the people who won the war. And Germany was hoping for that. So when Wilson went to Europe in 1919, he went to Europe to make sure that the 14 points were followed in the Paris Peace Conference. Unfortunately, the treaty that the Allies ended up with did not follow all of Wilson's ideas, and it was not popular in Congress. The Senate in the U.S. ultimately voted to reject the treaty, so the U.S. never actually signed the Treaty of Versailles. So here is what the treaty actually said. So the Austrian Empire and part of the Russian Empire were divided into new nation states. Most of the new countries were fairly small and weak and still included multiple ethnic groups. So some examples would be, examples of the new countries would be Poland, Estonia, Czechoslovakia. Serbia expanded their empire. They got more territory and they became Yugoslavia. So I'm going to move to this map, where you can see Yugoslavia is in the bottom portion of the screen. It's the little pink or peach country, Yugoslavia. Germany was the problem with all these new countries is, again, they're small and weak, and they're on one side they've got Germany, and on the other side they've got Russia. So they're kind of surrounded by two large, potentially powerful countries once they recover from World War I. The next part of the treaty is that Germany was blamed for starting the war and they were punished, so they had to give up land to France, Poland, and Denmark. They lost any colonies that they had gained. They had to admit they were to blame, so this is known as the War Guilt Clause. They had to pay their victims, so since Germany was at fault for the war, according to all of these countries, Germany had to pay for the war and pay their victims. Germany had to lose their Navy and Air Force. So they had to destroy their Navy, they had to destroy their Air Force. Their army had to shrink, and they could only produce a certain amount of ammunition each year. They could only have a certain number of soldiers, certain number of tanks. Again, this is to try and prevent Germany from becoming powerful in the future. And at the time, Austria had a lot of German-speaking people and wanted to join Germany after World War I because they were both very weak. And the Allies said that Germany and Austria could not merge because it would potentially make Germany and Austria a lot more powerful. So they were trying to prevent that as well. One of the final points of the treaty is they established a League of Nations to try and preserve the peace. So they were hoping that countries could discuss disagreements and settle them peacefully. They wanted the League of Nations to vote on economic sanctions to try and stop behavior. So, for example, they could stop trade until a country stopped doing something wrong. So instead of going to war, they would just stop trade. Some problems with the League of Nations is that Germany and Russia were excluded. Germany because people blamed them for causing World War I, and Russia because they were still recovering from the revolution. They were communist, and they were doing some embarrassing things at the time. The U.S. never joined the League of Nations. So again, it's like Wilson's baby. It's his brainchild. It's his idea. The U.S. never joins. And part of that is when Wilson went to Europe, he only brought members from his political party. So he did not bring members from the other political party. And the other political party controlled controlled the Senate at the time. So the U.S. Senate voted to reject the treaty and never signed and never joined the League of Nations. So that kind of leads us into problems with the treaty. So problems with the treaty include only the winning countries were allowed at the peace conference. So Germany did not get to participate in the peace conference that essentially blamed them for everything. There were 32, I believe there are 32 leaders and delegates from, there were leaders and delegates from 32 countries, but the largest countries made most of the decisions. So that would include Britain, France, the U.S., and to some extent Italy and Japan. They were making the decisions at the peace conference. Wilson, again, only brought people from his own political party, even though the other political party controlled the Senate. So this created problems when the president tried to get the Senate to ratify it. And although Wilson was popular with the people of Europe, the leaders often ignored his opinions. Again, he's coming in and saying you need to get rid of your colonies, no more secret alliances, we need to form a League of Nations, ethnic groups should be able to be their own free, independent countries. So a lot of European countries are not going to like his ideas. The final really major problem with the treaty, so a lot of historians kind of point to the Treaty of Versailles as one of the causes of World War II, and part of that is Germany takes the blame for the war. They have to pay millions of dollars to other countries. Their army shrinks, their military shrinks. And the problem is the Allies never actually crossed into German borders. So the German citizens didn't feel that they had lost the war. But here they are taking this peace treaty and they have to sign it and they have to agree to it. And it really hurts Germany. So it really makes a lot of Germans mad and frustrated, and then having to repay millions of dollars helps sink the German economy, or it's really hard for the Germans. So this treaty is kind of used by the Germans on the eve of World War II to kind of rally support for Hitler. So again, it kind of helps lead to World War II because Germany ends up resenting the Allies and resenting the countries who made them sign the treaty. So that is the Treaty of Versailles in a nutshell.